Imagine waking up each day behind bars, year after year, decade after decade, knowing deep in your soul that you are innocent. But no one listens, no one believes you. No judge, no jury, no official. Just the walls that close in a little tighter each passing year. That was the reality for Peter Sullivan, convicted in 1987 for the savage rape and murder of 21-year-old Diane Sindel. Peter was painted as a monster and locked away in one of Britain's most secure prisons. He spent 38 years behind bars, longer than many serial killers. But through it all, he never stopped proclaiming his innocence. And in 2024, the courts finally admitted it. Peter Sullivan did not commit that crime. But that brings us to the real questions. What really happened on that August night in 1986? Why did the police and courts believe Peter Sullivan was guilty, despite shaky evidence and a coerced confession at that time? How could the justice system ignore red flags for nearly 4 decades? And the most disturbing question remains, are there others like Peter out there, still waiting for justice? This is the story of Peter Sullivan, a story of injustice, resilience, and the search for truth. The unseen murder, the rushed and biased investigation. On the night of August 1, 1986, a 21-year-old woman named Diane Sindel left her bartending shift at the Wellington pub in Bebington, Merseyside. She was bright, loved in her community, and working 2 jobs, bartender and florist, while saving up for her wedding the following year. That night, her blue delivery van ran out of petrol. With no choice, Diane began walking alone along Borough Road, one of Birkenhead's main streets. It was late, but the street was well lit and fairly busy. She then never made it home. Around 12:10 a.m., a taxi driver reported seeing a man and a woman arguing. He said, the man put his hand out toward the girl. They looked like they knew each other, but they were definitely arguing. Between 12:30 and 2 a.m., several residents said they heard screams, but no one saw what happened. The next morning, Diane's partially clothed body was discovered in an alley off Borough Road by a man walking his dog. The scene was described as brutal. According to the pathologist, the very worst injuries I've seen outside of a road traffic accident. Diane had been raped, beaten, mutilated. Her breasts were cut, her skull was fractured from repeated blunt force trauma. She died from a brain hemorrhage. It was a horrifying crime that sent shockwaves through the community. Near the site, where her body was found, a black stone memorial was later erected with the chilling inscription, Diane Sindel, murdered because she was a woman. The police launched the largest investigation in Merseyside's history. More than 3,000 people were interviewed. But there were no security cameras, no eyewitnesses, no physical evidence linking anyone to the scene. A senior officer told, "We haven't got any sightings whatsoever of Diane walking back along Borough Road towards the town center." With no suspects and rising public fear, especially among women, the pressure on police mounted. The first Reclaim the Night march in the region was held shortly after. New organizations like RASA Merseyside emerged to support sexual assault survivors. Fear turned into anger. But justice was still far off. Then, on August 10, a day after the murder, a disturbing clue surfaced. Diane's burned clothing was found at Bidston Hill, not far from the crime scene. A couple reported seeing a man flee from the area. They believed his name was Pete. That man was Peter Sullivan, a 30-year-old unemployed local resident. He had no prior criminal record, lived quietly near Birkenhead, and was described as withdrawn and passive. He was known as someone who kept to himself, troubled, but harmless. Despite failing to identify him in a lineup, investigators focused on Sullivan. The fact that his name sounded like Petey, and he lived nearby was apparently enough. The weeks passed, and without a clearer suspect, Peter became the default target. Crucially, there was no DNA, no fingerprints, and no forensic evidence tying Peter to the scene. The semen recovered from Diane's body had been diluted by rainfall, rendering it untestable at the time. And yet, the absence of evidence did little to slow the momentum. Peter Sullivan was arrested weeks after Diane Sindel's murder. During questioning, Peter was denied both legal representation and an appropriate adult guardian, a direct violation of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984. This law was designed to protect vulnerable suspects like Peter, who, according to later psychological evaluations, had limited intellectual functioning, a tendency to fantasize, and being highly suggestible, especially under pressure. It is possible for him to fabricate stories just to satisfy authority figures. His lawyer, Jason Pitter KC, described him as a fantasist. prone to giving confusing, inconsistent answers. The court would later describe his statements as nonsense. Peter was interrogated for hours. He made several contradictory statements, sometimes claiming responsibility, then quickly retracting. None of his confessions contained details only the killer would know. Still, the police treated them as valid. With no DNA, no fingerprints, and no eyewitnesses to the attack, investigators were waiting for something, anything, to tie Peter to the crime, and it really came for them. A forensic dentist testified that a bite mark found on Diane's body matched Peter's teeth. At the time, bite mark analysis was considered credible by many courts, but it has since been widely discredited. Years later, Professor Aim Pretty, a leading forensic odontologist, would dismiss the original analysis outright. The 1987 bite mark identification was unreliable and methodologically flawed. Yet in 1987 it was enough. At trial, Peter remained silent in the dock. His family sat in the public gallery, visibly broken. His mother collapsed. His sister, Kim Smith, fainted from the emotional weight. Outside, the tabloids had already decided his guilt. They branded him with names that would haunt him for decades, like the Beast of Birkenhead or the Mersey Monster. Despite the glaring lack of physical evidence, Peter was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years. He would go on to serve more than twice that. Peter was sent to HMP Wakefield, a high-security prison known for housing some of the UK's most dangerous criminals. But unlike them, Peter never stopped declaring his innocence. He tried to appeal. In 2008 and 2016, he submitted requests to the Criminal Cases Review Mission to revisit his conviction. Both times, he was denied. The reason? The DNA sample found on Diane's body was believed to be too degraded to test. But the sample had been preserved. In 2019, he attempted to appeal again, focusing on the faulty bite mark evidence. The court rejected it, ironically stating that bite mark wasn't central to the conviction, despite it being heavily emphasized during trial. The contradiction was clear. The justice system had created a maze of technicalities and denial, leaving Peter to rot in silence. Meanwhile, time did its damage. Peter grew older. He lost his hearing, his eyesight, and his health. He became a man robbed of his youth, his relationships, and the opportunity for a normal life. He would later write, "I have had to silently endure this, and watch it stripped from me in the worst environment imaginable." And still, the truth remained buried, until new DNA technology and growing scrutiny forced the system to take a second look. Peter Sullivan had served 38 years for a murder he did not commit, but the damage had long since been done. The breakthrough, exoneration, and aftermath. After decades of rejection and silence, Peter Sullivan's long fight for justice finally gained traction in 2021. He submitted a third application to CCRC. This time, the context had shifted. A breakthrough case in 2023 involving Andrew Malkinson, another wrongfully imprisoned man exonerated after 17 years through modern DNA analysis, had sparked national outrage. It placed mounting pressure on both the CCRC and the Ministry of Justice to acknowledge that scientific progress had outpaced the system's caution. Parliament members raised concerns. The press demanded reform. Suddenly, Sullivan's case couldn't be ignored. Finally, the CCRC agreed to deepen the investigation and ordered a new forensic analysis of the semen sample recovered from Diane Sindle's body. In 2024, new DNA testing revealed what Peter had always claimed: the genetic material was not his. It belonged to an unknown male, never previously identified, referred to in court as unknown male 1. Forensic experts confirmed that it was more than 1 billion times more likely to be someone else than Sullivan. It was irrefutable. In May 2024, the Court of Appeal convened to hear Peter's case. He was not physically present in the courtroom. Instead, he appeared via video link from HMP Wakefield, the high-security prison nicknamed Monster Mansion, where he had spent nearly 4 decades, confined alongside some of the UK's most notorious criminals. As Lord Justice Holroyd presided, arguments were heard for over 2 hours. Then came the words Peter had waited his entire adult life to hear: "Can no longer consider the conviction to be safe." The conviction was formally quashed. Upon hearing the ruling, Peter lowered his head onto the desk in front of him and wept silently. The courtroom, filled with family, campaigners, and supporters, broke down in tears. The moment was powerful. The weight of nearly 40 years lifted, but it had come far too late. The legal reasoning behind the exoneration was crystal clear. The new DNA evidence was not only decisive, it rendered the original trial untenable. Peter's alleged confession had always been riddled with contradictions, extracted during an unlawful interrogation without a lawyer or appropriate adult present, a direct violation of the PACE 1984. He was vulnerable, easily led, and described by his own legal team as a fantasist, someone who fabricated to satisfy authority figures. Meanwhile, the bite mark evidence that had once helped seal his conviction had long since been discredited. As Lord Justice Holroyd remarked, had this DNA evidence been available in 1987, there would have been no prosecution at all. Peter released a written statement through his lawyer. "I lost my liberty 4 decades ago over a crime I did not commit. I am not angry. I am not bitter. I only wish to return to my loved ones and rebuild what is left of the driftwood that is my life. As God is my witness, it is said, the truth shall set you free. It is unfortunate that it does not give a timescale." He described the toll of incarceration. "I am aware of how cruel time can be to a person stripped of their youth and mobility, sight and hearing. I have had to silently endure this and watch it stripped from me in the worst environment imaginable. I will not comment on the horrors done to me over that time. There are too many. With this, I humbly request that you allow me my privacy while I begin repairing what I may from the driftwood that is my life." He also offered deep gratitude to those who stood by him through the decades, legal teams and advocates who refused to give up say. Without the combined efforts of Sarah Matz, Jim Little-Hales, Jason Pitter-Casey, Emily Carnes, and their teams, this outcome would not have been possible. I will be eternally grateful to each and every one of them. Perhaps most remarkable was Peter's message to the family of Diane Sindall. "I am so sorry to the family of Diane Sindall, who now have to come to terms with the death of their daughter being down to someone else. And I long to see the right thing done for this horrible crime so that they will find peace." His sister, Kim Smith, who had campaigned relentlessly for his freedom, addressed the media with a voice filled with grief. "We lost Peter for 39 years. We haven't won. Peter hasn't won, and neither has Diane's family. We all lost something we can never get back." She demanded the public stop using the names tabloids had branded her brother with, "the Beast of Birkenhead," or "the Mersey Monster." As the court overturned the conviction, another question emerged, one that hangs unanswered: who really killed Diane Sindall? The DNA belongs to someone else, unknown male one. Merseyside police, now under intense scrutiny, have eliminated more than 260 men from their original suspect list using DNA analysis. So far, no match has been found in the national database. The National Crime Agency has joined efforts to finally identify the true perpetrator. Meanwhile, the issue of compensation remains unresolved. Under UK law, Peter Sullivan may be eligible for up to fee $1 million, or about the 26,000 per year wrongfully imprisoned. But many argue that no amount can restore the nearly 40 years stolen from him. Until 2023, the government even deducted the cost of food and accommodation from compensation awards, a practice now repealed, but still remembered bitterly as a second slap in the face by the system. Peter has not publicly confirmed whether he will pursue financial compensation. For now, his focus is not on money but on healing. And yet, the most chilling truth remains: how many more? How many other innocent people like Peter Sullivan are still locked behind bars, waiting, silently, for justice to catch up? Rushed trials vs. delayed justice. When justice is rushed, innocent lives can be destroyed. When justice drags on, victims may never find peace. The case of Peter Sullivan is one of the clearest, most painful examples of this paradox. In 1987, Peter Sullivan was convicted just months after the murder of 21-year-old Diane Sindall. The result? A man wrongfully imprisoned for 38 years. The real killer remained free. Had the UK still enforced capital punishment, Peter Sullivan, convicted of rape and murder and denied multiple appeals, might have been executed before his innocence was ever proven. But the other side of the coin is no less tragic. To this day, Diane Sindall's family still doesn't know who killed her. The DNA found on her body belongs to an unidentified man. Delayed justice, whether by negligence or inertia, can be its own form of cruelty. For the victim's family, justice postponed feels no different from justice denied. When the wrong person is prosecuted, the real perpetrator walks free, and two families suffer instead of one. This is not unique to Peter's case. Across decades and continents, similar patterns have played out. Andrew Malkinson served 17 years for a rape he didn't commit, despite DNA evidence not matching him and being actively suppressed by police. The Birmingham Six were tortured into confessions and jailed for 16 years over an IRA bombing. In the US, Anthony Ray Hinton spent 30 years on death row in Alabama based on junk science and an incompetent defense. These are cases where justice came too fast and wrong, but others waited too long and justice never came at all. Jimmy Savile, a media icon in the UK, abused children and vulnerable people for over 4 decades. He died in 2011, never facing trial. More than 450 victims came forward after his death. Why? Because his power, reputation, and systemic inaction shielded him for years. In the US, Robert Durst, accused of killing his wife in 1982, was finally convicted of a different murder in 2021. He died just months later, never facing trial for the earlier crimes. And Jeffrey Epstein, arrested in 2019 for trafficking underage girls, died in prison before trial. Dozens of survivors never got their day in court. The tension between urgency and accuracy is real. Legal experts warn that while swift justice feels satisfying, it can lead to irreversible errors, especially in death penalty cases. Meanwhile, endless delays erode public trust. One lawyer put it best: justice must be swift, but it must never be reckless. And when it's slow, it must be honest about why. And amid this tension, the media often becomes an accelerant. In Peter's case, headlines branded him the Beast of Birkenhead. In the eyes of the public, he was already guilty before his trial began. The court was pressured, the system failed, and almost no one asked the harder question: what if they got it wrong? In the end, both extremes have devastating consequences. Rushing may crush the innocent, waiting may bury the truth, and somewhere in between, real justice struggles to survive. So we ask you, what do you believe is more dangerous, rushing to convict, or delaying too long to act? Is it ever acceptable to prioritize public reassurance over thorough investigation? And how do we balance the need for swift justice with the responsibility to get it right? The case of Peter Sullivan is not just a story about a man who was wrongfully imprisoned. It is a mirror held up to our justice system, a painful reminder that truth is not always the loudest voice in the room. It teaches us that certainty is not proof, that pressure can become prejudice, and that even well-intentioned systems can fail when they are driven by fear, speed, or public demand rather than facts. This case also shows the quiet power of perseverance, the importance of those who keep fighting, even when no one listens: lawyers, family, investigators, and the wrongly convicted themselves. Without their relentless pursuit of truth, Peter Sullivan's name might still be buried under a lie. But perhaps the hardest lesson of all is this: justice is not a destination, it is a responsibility. Ours to demand, ours to protect, and always ours to question.